Hello there, this is Nnedi, and I am here with another Friday Reads. And this week I have got a graphic novel bonanza for you. I've also got a couple of audiobooks about social justice, a book of poetry, and a cookbook. But first off, my bookish week. So it was my YA book club on Wednesday. We talked about Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulay and Borders by Thomas King, adapted by Natasha Donovan into a graphic novel format. So both of those books I talked about last week in my Friday Reads, and our club was pretty much unanimous. We all highly recommend both books. If you haven't yet read them, two great contemporary Indigenous perspectives. And it's been Freedom to Read Week in Canada. It goes from February 20th to the 26th, so it ends tomorrow. Yesterday I watched a panel that Freedom to Read is sponsored by the Book and Periodical Council. And it's been going for 38 years now. I heard that they wanted to distinguish it from the American Banned Books Week. I think that's in October. And instead emphasize freedom to read. The panel that I watched, there were three Canadian children's book authors who talked about challenges that they'd experienced to their work, both in Canada and the US. And those authors were Robin Stevenson and David Robertson and who's the other one? Christine Baldacchino. So let's get to the books. I did a buddy read with Roz of Scallydandling about the books. She's been doing a graphic novel project, and I have been recommending books to her. And I not only recommended Rutu Modan, Exit Wounds, but I also did a buddy read. So it had been 15 years since I had read this. That was when it first came out in about 2007. And I remembered that I loved it, but I didn't remember what happened. So that was good because it's a page turner. It is set in Tel Aviv. Rutu Modan is a Hebrew, or Israeli, she writes in Hebrew. She's an Israeli cartoonist. And this is her first book. And she has several out that have been translated to English since then. So the premise is that this taxi driver, Kobe, he has been estranged from his father for a while, and he gets contacted by a young woman who says that she'd been in a relationship with his father, and she's afraid that he might have died in a bombing. There was an unidentified body, and she's afraid that he might be that person, but she has no family connection, so she can't ascertain that. So she needs his help. So that's how it begins. You can see that her style is very clear line, sort of like a Tintin type illustrations. And I'm looking for when you see background, it's kind of in a lighter shades, and so the things that are less important kind of recede, and it's really easy to focus on the main characters. And she's really good at body gesture and being able to tell emotions based on the way people are positioned. It is about just regular, ordinary people, and we get a sense of the interiority of these central characters. Even minor characters are really well done. So if you like character-based fiction, I highly recommend this one. It's also got excellent plotting. So there's that too. It's a page turner, it really is. So this one is an adult book. Did I mention it's translated by Noah Stollman? This one is a Canadian children's graphic novel, Living with Viola. So it's by Rosena Fung. And Rosena Fung is she's the child of Hong Kong immigrants to Canada, and her character Olivia is in a similar situation. There's a character named Viola that is like a manifestation of Olivia's mental health. So she has anxieties, and she keeps hearing this voice and she calls that voice Viola, about never being good enough and just being uncool. And she's in grade 6, and this book is a really good depiction of not only of mental illness, but also about coping skills for that, and about asking adults for help, and also about navigating two different identities with her Chinese immigrant family and extended relatives who aren't so understanding of her desire to be an artist, for example, because of course she needs to be a doctor. But her parents aren't like that. They're much more supportive. And also about needing help with her support for her mental health. And this one is pretty much a teen level. Superman smashes the Klan. The author is Jean Luen Yang, who is Taiwanese American, and the illustrator is Gurihiru. So this is based on an old-time radio show about Superman and the Ku Klux Klan. So the story is set in 1946, and the focus is on anti-Asian racism. The Klan in here is called the Klan of the Fiery Cross. So Superman, as you know, comes from another planet. So there's his questioning of identity. We see a little bit of him growing up. And there's also a couple of teenage Chinese Americans who've moved with their family from Chinatown into the more white area of Metropolis. And they are immediately targeted by the Klan with the burning cross on their lawn. There's lots of nuance in here, and it's a standalone, so you don't have to know anything about Superman to make sense of this, although I think many people have at least a passing awareness of Superman. But it is It's excellent. Really, really good. And it does show that there's a gray area between good and evil. And yeah, I was really surprised. Even though I had heard great things about it, I was still surprised at how good it was. I also read the second volume of Boys Run the Riot. So this is about a teenage trans man. I think he's in his final year of high school. And he and a couple of other boys start a fashion brand. So in this volume, they are working on, expanding their brand. And Ryo, who's the central character, the trans boy, gets a job, and so is continually dealing with who to tell that he's trans. He meets another trans person for the first time, someone who's a little bit older, who says the person who causes you the greatest pain is yourself. Yeah, very character-based. This one is, like the first one, translated by McDonagh. And if you want to see the art, so very character-based, contemporary realism. I've got a French language book to tell you about. Anatole qui ne se séchait jamais. And this is by Stéphanie Boulay and Agathe Bray-Bourret. It's published by Fung in Quebec. And the English translation is Riley Can't Stop Crying, and that one is put out by Orca. The translation is by Charles Simard. You see it's got this black on it that to show that it's a library discard. And that's because when I pulled this off the shelf at the library, I flipped it open and I discovered that two of the pages had been stuck together with something and then pulled apart. That had already happened, but what happened was the print from one side was torn off the page, and I just pointed it out to a staff member to note the damage, and she just discarded the book. She said, well, we're not going to keep it, so you can do whatever you like with it. So I will pass this on to a little grandniece who's in a French language program in Whitehorse, and I think she will like it. There's another sticker on here, Bataille des Bouquins, that's Battle of the Books, as it's part of a Reader's Choice competition happening at the Edmonton Public Library. So, what's this about? Why is this boy crying? Well, his older sister, who's I think about grade 5 or so, and his father, there's the three of them in the family, they do not know why he's crying. And there's some quite humorous illustrations. They try everything they can to cheer him up. So it's bright watercolor art. And in the end, it's the sister, often the sister who manages to, siblings are often the ones who have a better idea about what's going on, who thinks, maybe Anatole needs to choose his own clothes. And so they look online, and he chooses like a baseball shirt and a yellow skirt and a bunch of other things. And the father says maybe we'll get everything except the yellow skirt because that's for girls. And the sister, I think her name is Regine, Anyway, she convinces him to get the father to buy the skirt as well. And they also go through the toys. And Anatole picks out the toys that he likes the best, including his sister's rainbow pony and magic wand and some jelly octopuses. And they get to choose what kind of haircut they want. So the sister gets a couple of pink streaks in her hair, and Anatole gets the sides of his head shaved and sort of a long mohawk kind of thing at the top. So that's what he wants. And they repaint their rooms. His, instead of blue, is now yellow, and hers, instead of pink, is now green. And he becomes a much happier boy, even though he doesn't look like the others. So basically, this is it's a very fun and yet necessary depiction of questioning identity from a very young age. This child is 4 in the book, and he's trying out different clothes, different hair, and ends up being so much happier. Got that nice bright art. Also like the end papers in this book. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? So the reading age for this book is about grade 1 to 6. And it's a great way to look at difference, and that it's okay to be different, and how to feel good about yourself. Yes, so it's about the gender spectrum, and it's just charming, absolutely charming. Now, here's another charming character. It's a little robot, artificial intelligence, very smart robot named Tim21. And it is, what I read was the first volume of the series Descender. The first volume is called Tin Stars. And it is written by Jeff Lemire, Canadian cartoonist, and illustrated by Dustin Nguyen, who's a Vietnamese-American cartoonist. So here's a little bit of backstory about how Tim21 was made as a class, what is it called? Class A companion robot. My primary function is to entertain, protect, and assist in the education of my assigned human child companion. Does that remind you of anything? It sure reminded me of Clara and the Sun. And and also, I'm currently reading The Membranes, a science fiction book where the central character had an artificial intelligence best friend named Nnedi. And in this graphic novel, Tim21 is assigned to a little boy named Andy. I mean, I know that Andy's short for android, although in this case it's a human boy who's Andy. It is an adventure story with multiple planets, global politics, and what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have rights and feelings? So I really recommend that. And although I've been aware of Jeff Lemire, I've read lots of his books, the reason why I picked this up is because of Becca from Read Becca. So Thank you so much, Becca, for reminding me about it. Here is an adaptation of a story by, can you see that? Nnedi Okorafor, who's a Nigerian-American writer. And so the original story was called On the Road. It was in her collection called Kabu Kabu. So the person who did the adaptation, the story adaptation, was John Jennings, and it was Dave Brame who did the artwork. To show you the end papers, isn't that pretty? David Brame describes himself as a blackety-black Afrofuturist, and this is a horror. It's based on, or draws on West African folklore, and it's pretty suspenseful and unnerving, really. Yeah, here you can see some of the expression a little bit. It is about a woman who's a cop in Chicago who is visiting her grandmother and her great aunt in Nigeria when, some kind of supernatural thing is happening to her. I'm not going to give away the story, but I love this scene where she grabs a can of beef ravioli as her weapon. If any of you have dropped a big can on your foot, you know that that could be quite an effective weapon. And there's lots of pages like this where this full color art goes, it just bleeds right out to the edges of the pages. The color is just very rich, lots of black. So there's lots of emotion in it. And the story itself actually reminded me a little bit of Marlon James's Black Leopard, Red Wolf, except just condensed down to a short story. And also there was a collection of short stories called What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky, and that was by Leslie Arama. And again, you know, it was, I think because it's drawing on West African folklore, that's why that one came to mind. Now, the audiobooks. So both of these audiobooks are looking at important issues of social justice. One is about racism, and the other one is about the migrant and refugee crisis. And both of them turn these issues, they turn them on their head or kind of reframe them by examining root cause. So, and the common root cause for both of those things are global capitalism and conquest and imperialism, and basically the invention of racism, or the invention of the concept of race. So the first book is called What White People Can Do Next, and the subtitle is From Allyship to Coalition. The author is Emma Dabiri, and she is a Nigerian-Irish academic. So this is a really short audiobook. It's only 3 hours long, and it's based on some writings that she had online, so you can probably find, you know, much of the content there as well. But I do recommend the audiobook. The author reads it herself, and she has a lot of hope that people can transform. just get rid of guilt, throw out the white saviorship idea, and that everybody needs to work together. So, the title is What White People Can Do Next, but the book is actually aimed at everybody, and how we all need to recognize that we have common goals, and the whole the concept of race was invented 500 years ago in order to enact laws that made wealth and privilege available to one group of people and not to another. So, yeah, what can I say? Listen to it, read it, it's great. And then the other book was much longer. I think it was about 10 hours long. And that is one called Border and Rule. The subtitle is Global Migration, Capitalism, and the Rise of Racist Nationalism. And it is by Harsha Walia. She is she's of South Asian ethnicity, I think, and originally from Bahrain, and now she lives in Canada. And so she talks about migrants and refugees, and again, looking at why there are so many people on the move. And it's because of the money, capitalism, and yes. So for example, she talks about during the COVID-19 pandemic, when pretty much all processing of refugee claims in the US was stopped, there was a fast tracking of permits, visas for migrant farm workers, because agricultural and food industry is considered essential, and they need a steady supply of cheap labor. And government officials are actually working hard to reduce the pay to migrant workers in order to give agribusiness a break. So the workers themselves are considered disposable. They're underpaid, and yet they're also it's what they create, or what they produce, that's considered essential, but not the workers themselves. There are so many eye-opening facts in this book, like less than 1% of refugees living in camps around the world ever make it to a permanent home, and over a half of these people in these refugee camps are under the age of 18. Around the world, large dam construction has displaced somewhere between 40 and 80 million people in the last 6 decades, and including, many of those have been Indigenous peoples. So if you would guess which nationality it has the largest percentage of people who overstay their work visa in the US, you might guess that it was a Latin American country, because the Latinx migrants and refugees constitute the vast majority of the detainees there. However, the nationality that most overstays their work visa in the US are Canadians. In 2017, there were 92,000 Canadians who overstayed very few of them are ever detained. If you put Canadians together with Europeans, they make up almost a half of U.S. immigration overstay violations. Again, very few of them are detained. There's illegality and race are just so tied together. In another section of the book, she talks about the oil-rich countries, the GCC, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, where migrant workers make up between 40 to 90% of the each country's population. So in that region, non-nationals represent 51% of the total population and 67% of the labor force. And there are reasons why these people are kept as in a different status. They don't get a permanent home there. They might live there for 20 or 30 years, but they are kept oppressed, basically, and mistreated by being migrant workers. In Europe, anti-immigration sentiments are the primary reason that voters vote for far-right parties across Europe. Canada has regressive immigrant labor rules as well. So, again, what can I say except read this book or listen to the audiobook. The audiobook is read by Cindy Kay. It has a long introduction by Robin D.G. Kelly and an afterword by Nick Estes. And coincidentally, the author of What White People Can Do Next recommended Robin D.G. Kelly as an author to turn to read more of. So basically, conquest, global capitalism, and climate change are what's behind the current migrant and refugee crisis. So very quickly I'll mention, I read a poetry book, Exhibitionist, by Molly Cross Blanchard. She is mixed ethnicity, white and Métis. There she is there. I feel like these poems are aimed at a reader who's younger than me. I have a couple of friends in mind that I think would really like it. They didn't quite hit for me, although I did like some of them a lot. She writes about shame, awkwardness, longing, and I heard so many great things about this, so I think that I'm just not the right person for it. And lastly, I read that cookbook, Baking with Dory by Dory Greenspan. And I did a half-hour video all about it. So if you want to know about that cookbook, you can watch the video, all right? And that's all I got for today. And thank you, everybody, so much for watching. It's great to get comments from you, so If you have anything to say about any of these books that I've talked about today, please feel free to comment. I always look forward to your comments, and I will see you all in the next one. So, bye for now.